There we go, I think. Okay. Machshirin. Base Yud Aleph. Regarding second year produce that was greater than produce of the third year, and produce of the third year that was greater than produce of the fourth year, and produce of the fourth year that was greater than that produce of the fifth year, and produce of the fifth year that was greater than produce of the sixth year, and produce of the sixth year that was greater than the produce of the seventh year, and produce of the seventh year that was greater than the produce of the year. But following the seventh year, we follow the majority. If half of the produce is from the 1 year and half from another year, we rule stringently. Regarding a sack that is filled with produce was one placed on the riverbank or over the river opening of a cistern on the steps of a cave, and the produce absorbed water, all the produce that absorbed water is included in the law of water is placed. If Yehuda says all the produce that faces the water is included in the law of water is placed, and all the produce that does not face the water is not included in the law of water is placed. Regarding a barrel that is full of produce and it was placed into liquid, or a barrel full of liquid and it was placed into a produce, and the produce absorbed liquid, all the produce that absorbed liquid is included in the law of water is placed. And they said in this regard with these liquids, with regard to water, wine, and vinegar, but with regard to all the other liquids, the produce is tahor. From the Kemer was legumes tahor, for legumes do not absorb.
Okay.
Well, I need like 10 seconds, just 10 seconds, okay? I'll be right. Okay. Go.
Okay, so Mishna. Rode paschama. So when they say rode, it's like they used to make their bread like pitta on the walls of the oven. So when they take the bread off the walls of the oven, unasana al pi chavis. So now you've got this hot bread that's just come out the oven, and he puts it to cool, and the nearest available surface is happens to be a barrel of wine. So he sticks it on top of the barrel of wine, and now the question is, are the fumes of the wine going to be machshir the bread? Now, first of all, the bread, normally bread is already makabel tuma immediately because you took flour and mixed it with water. So this bread, obviously, that we're talking about over here, for there to be a shaila of it not being b'chiyutan, it must be mazonos bread mixed with fruit juice or something like that. Okay, so we're talking about something that never came into contact with water. And now the question is, it's sitting on top of this barrel of wine. Do the fumes of the wine get absorbed into the hot bread and make it and be machshir? Rabbi Meir says yes. He says this will now absorb. It'll have condensation from the wine on the surface of the bread, and that will be machshirit, and it's now makabel tuma. Rabbi Yehuda mitaher. He says this is not. This doesn't count. No moisture is actually touching the bread, and therefore it's still tahor. Rabbi Yossi matahar b'shel chitzim and matahar b'shel seorim mipnei she'asorim shavos. He says there's a difference what kind of flour you're using. If you're using barley flour, it absorbs more, and therefore it will be mekabel tumah, but wheat flour will still remain tahor. Okay. And halacha follows Rabbi Yossi. So that's by the way a common situation is that when you have an argument between Rabbi Yossi and his contemporaries, halacha very often follows Rabbi Yossi. Okay, Mishnah Daled Hamirabetz es Beiso. So here, so in the old days they didn't have all these nice tiled floors. Sometimes it was just a dirt floor with and if you wanted to stop the dust from rising, you'd sprinkle the floor with water and smooth it out. So this is what's happening over here. Mirabetz is based over nasan bochitim. So having sprinkled the floor and smoothed it out, he now brings in his wheat, which up until now has not become wet. Betananu. And now the wheat starts getting damp in its position. So shaila comes, is it now makabel tuma? Im machmas hamayim b'chiyutan, v'im machmas hasela einan b'chiyutan. So if it's because of the water that's on the floor that's been sprinkled, that water was put there with intention, and therefore it will be, if it now wets the grain, the grain will be muhshar. However, if it's just because the rock base of the house, so let's just say if we were talking about a situation where the house just had a stone floor and it was cold and there was condensation, which then made the wheat wet. That is not considered intentional. So how can you tell between the two if there's any doubt? Well, if it's on a wet floor that you sprinkled water, and I think that's I'm not sure how you could tell if you were if it was a mixture of rock and wet sand over there, which one is making it wet. But basically, I think it's just contrasting the two cases of wet floor because it's been because you wet the floor, that's b'chiyutan, but wet because it's because of condensation on cold rock, that's not b'chiyutan. Hamechabes is kesusa ba'ariva. A guy was washing his clothing in a bowl. Okay, so he's finished washing his clothing. He pours out the water, and now he puts some wheat into the same bowl, v'tananu, and now the wheat gets wet. Okay. If it was because he didn't dry out the bowl well enough and there was still water left behind inside the bowl, no excuses. You that water was there intentionally, and you put the wheat inside. It's now makabel tuma. Im machmas atzman, if they became wet because of themselves, well, actually, there's an easier gersa, which is machmas atzma, because of it. In other words, because of the coldness of the bowl itself. So let's say the bowl had not been wet because you were washing in it, but let's say it was a metal bowl that was just cold and had condensation on it. That would not be considered bechiyutan. Okay. Metanin b'chol. What happens if somebody is storing inside the sand? Okay, so that was also a common use case with vegetables. You dug up some vegetables from your field, and now you want to store them, so you dig a pit in the ground and keep the veggies there to preserve them. Hareze b'chiyutan. So because hold on a second. Why because it's because you keep it in wet sand. The wet sand acts like a fridge. So because the sand was intentionally wet, that's definitely b'chiyutan. Because that water is there with the purpose of cooling the fruit, and therefore, if it wets the fruit, that's not b'chiyutan. Maaseh ba'anshe hamachoz, and to back this up, there was a maaseh shehaya. People in the area of Machoz, the Machoz, which is it's a belt of land where the sand is red. Oh no, it's not red. I beg your pardon. I read that wrong. Where the sand, where the ground is mostly sand. So that's so they used to store their vegetables in the sand like that. Amr lahem chachamim. And the Chachamim came and saw what they were doing and said, Im kacha yitzim osim. If this is what you've been doing all the time, lo asisim tara meimechem, then you've never been able to keep your vegetables tahor because you thought that they were tahor, storing them in the sand, and you weren't careful about touching them with tamei hands or whatever. And now they're mukshar. There's no question that you've never been keeping tara in your lives. Okay, stark musar there. Mishna hey, metanin betit hanaguv. Here you've got so someone puts his produce into dry plaster, but even in dry plaster there's a certain amount of moisture.
They call it plaster here. They call it mud, dry mud.
Mud. Okay, fine. Yeah, that's probably better. It's a dried mud. So they store it in dried mud. Rabbi Shimon Omer im yesh bo mashke tofech. If the mud still has enough moisture in it that it would wet something that it comes into contact with, b'chiyutan, that's mochshar. V'imlav eno b'chiyutan. And if not, then any moisture, any wetness that comes onto the plants, onto the vegetables is considered condensation rather than something that came from the mud. So it's not b'chiyutan. Hamirabetz es gorno. So he sprinkles the floor of his threshing floor, okay, again to get the dust down and smooth out the floor. So he doesn't have to worry about having put chitim. In other words, if he put his wheat down, he doesn't have to worry that it might have gotten wet because the threshing floor is different from the floor of a household. It is very dry in the threshing floor in general. So any water that is sprinkled on the ground is assumed to have been absorbed, like gone, and He doesn't have to worry that maybe the bottom got wet. Okay. Hamalaket asavim kashe'atal aleihem. So a guy went out gathering herbs while early in the morning when there's still dew on the herbs. Okay, lahatin behen chitim and or herbs or grasses. Just it doesn't have to be edible stuff. He took it in order to use it as coolant, something to keep his wheat fresh. So that was going to be the base, and he's going to put his wheat on top of it to keep it fresh. Okay, einan b'chiyutan. They said, don't worry about the dew. The dew is not what he was going for. He just wants the fresh grasses because the coolness of the fresh grasses will be good for the wheat. It's nothing to do with the dew, and therefore the dew is not considered a machshir here. However, if you looked and said, "Ooh, nice dew on these plants. Let me grab them and use them specifically," then that's called intentional. So now he's carrying his wheat to the mill so that he can grind it. And now it starts raining as he's on his way to the mill. If he's happy, it'll be easier to grind this now that it's wet. I'm not sure if that's the Matthias, to be honest. I don't know. I have very little experience grinding wheat, so I don't know if it's easier if it's wet or dry. But Rabbi Yehuda on there, of course he's going to be happy about it. Okay, why? Because he needs to sprinkle the wheat with water anyway at some point. So he says that that's not really the point over here. Says Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda, once again, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon are very often on opposite positions when it comes to Maaseh and Machshava. If you remember the argument that they had about the Romans, where Rabbi Yehuda just looks at the Maaseh and he says, look, the Maaseh, the Romans, whatever their intentions were, they built marketplaces and bridges and aqueducts, and yeah, go Romans. And Rabbi Shimon says their intentions were all krum and they were terrible and they did it because of all these terrible reasons. And he's going by Machshav, he's going by Kavanah. So here we've got Rabbi Yehuda again coming and saying, I don't care about your intention, whether you're happy or not. Ela im amad. What I'm going to judge you by is by your action. Did you stand still in the rain and said, "Hey, let me get some more rain on this wheat"? If he did that, that shows that he was happy about it, and therefore the wheat is considered mukshar. But he pays no attention to the fact of, is he happy? Is he not happy? I don't care. Everyone's happy about rain. Okay, back to Nida Yud Daled.
Regarding Azab, Atzava, and Anida, a woman who brings the birth, and a Misora who died, they convey Tumah through Maisa until their flesh declares. But a Bananju who dies is pure of conveying Tumah through Maisa. Great Shammai says all women who die are Nidos, but West Hill says only one who died when she was actually Anida is Anida. If a woman died and a revias of blood flowed from her, and the woman conveys tumah as a blood stain, and it conveys tumah via a roof, Rabbi Shimon says it does not convey tumah as a blood stain because it becomes large after she died. Rabbi Yehuda agrees in the case of a woman who was sitting on the birthing stool and died, and a revias of blood flowed from her, that it conveys tumah as a blood stain. Rabbi Yossi said, therefore, it does not convey tumah via a roof. At first, they said a woman who was observing her days until her blood, they pour water for the Pesach offering. They subsequently changed it to say, with regard to Kedoshim, she is like someone touched by one who was rendered tamei by a corpse, in order with the words of Beis Hillel. But Beit Shammai says she is even like a one who himself was rendered tamei by a corpse. Okay, let me just see. We're going to finish Nida, so tomorrow we're going to go to
back to Machshirin.
Let's finish over here. Sorry. Okay, so all right. If Anita put money into her mouth as she went down and immersed herself, she is purified of her tumor, but she's still tummy on the account of her saliva. If she put her hair in her mouth, or she clenched her hand, or she pressed her lips together as if she did not immerse herself. If one holds a person utensils and immerses them, they remain tummy. But if he rinses his hands in water, they become tummy. Tahor. If Shimon says he may loosen his hold so that the water should enter in between. Concealed areas or folded areas do not require that the water should enter into them. The following items intervene in the case of a person: wooden threads, leaden threads, and ribbon on wood girls' heads. The Yehuda says those of wool and of hair do not intervene because the water passes between them. The entangled hair of the chest or of the beard or of a woman's private parts, there a room outside the eye, an incrustation outside the womb, and a plaster on it, dried up, sap, incrustations of dirt on one's body, dough under the nail. Beads of a foreign substance, slimy mud, potter's clay, slimy puddles. What is meant by slimy mud? It is mud found in pits. It is, as it is stated, and he rinsed me from a tempestuous pit, raised me from a tempestuous pit, from slimy mud. What is meant by potter's clay? Its literal meaning. Rabbi Yossi declares tahor if one immersed with potter's clay, but he declares tameh if one immersed with sealant clay. What is meant by slimy puddles? They become, when dried up, studs of the roadway. In these types of mud, we may not immerse ourselves, but when we immerse them, but we may immerse them with any other mud if it is wet. One may not immerse oneself with dust on his feet, and one may not immerse a kettle with soot on it unless he rubbed it off.
Okay. Nagaim.
Right. Okay, Dalit. The Kohen does not go into his own house to confine, or nor does he stand inside the house that contains the nega to confine. Rather, he stands next to the entrance of the house that contains the nega and confines as stated, and the Kohen shall leave the house to the entrance of the house, and he shall confine the house for 7 days. He returns at the end of the week and examines the house. If it's spread, the Kohen commands that they remove the stones that have the nega and throw them outside the city to a tamei place. And they shall take other stones to replace them, to replace the removed stones, and he shall take other plants of the house. He does not take stones from this side of the house and build them into the other side, nor does he take clay from this side and build on the other side of the house, nor does he take lime. 2 stones are not replaced with 1 stone, and one stone with 2, but with 2, 3, or 4 stones can be replaced with 2. From here they say, woe is to the evildoer and woe is to his neighbor. Both owners remove the afflicted stones, scrape around them, and place the new stones. However, he alone brings clay, as it is stated, and he shall take another clay and plaster the house, and his neighbor does not assist him in the plastering. The Kohen returns at the end of the week to examine the house. If the nigger returned, the house is demolished, its stove, its stones, its wood, and all the clay of the house are removed from the city to a tamei place. An adjoining expansion of any size is tamei, and a distant one must be the size of a grist. The return of the house nigger must be 2 grists. Sorry. There are 10 houses. If the nigger turns dull after the first week or it disappears, it is scraped off and the house becomes tahor. If the nigger turns dull after the second week, or if it disappeared or is scraped off, and the house requires tahor, requires taharas haparorim. If the nigger spreads after the first week, the owner removes scrapes, plasters, and the Kohen gives to the house a week of confinement. If the nigger returns, the house is demolished. If the nigger does not return, the house requires taharas hapasaporim. If the nigger remains the same after the first week and spreads after the second, the owner removes scrapes and places and plasters, and the Kohen gives the house a week of confinement. If the nigger returns, the house is demolished. If the nigger does not return, the house requires taharas hapasaporim. If the nigger remains the same after both weeks, the owner will remove scrapes and plasters, and the Kohen gives the house a week of confinement. If the nigger returns, the house is demolished. If the nigger does not return, the house requires taharas haparim. If the nigger appears before the owner made the house tahar with taharas haparim, the house is demolished. And if the nigger reappears after the owner made the house tahar with taharas haparim, the house is examined anew.
Okay. Arachin.
Hey. Gimel. Hey. There is to the Lord that defamer an element of leniency as well as an element of stringency. How so? Whether he defamed the daughter of the most prominent family in Kohanim or the humblest family in Israel, he gives 100 selim. It emerges that the one who speaks evil, speaks with his mouth, is treated more severely than the one who commits a deed. but we find that the decrees were sealed against our forefathers in the desert only because of evil speech, as it is stated, and they tested me these 10 times and did not hearken to my voice. The ability to play depends on the vow. The age of the category depends on the vow. The Arakan plays on the subject of the Eric, and the Eric upon the time of this Eric. This ability to pay depends upon the vower. How so? A poor man who vowed the Eric of a rich man gives the Eric of a poor man, and a rich man who vowed the Eric of a poor man gives the Eric of a rich man. But with sacrificial offerings, it is not so. Should one say, I take upon myself to give the offering of the Matzorah? If the Matzorah was poor, he brings the offering. If a poor man, if he was rich, he brings the offering of a rich man. Rebbe says, I say that even in the case of a Rachim, it is so. Why is it that a poor man who vowed the Eric of a rich man gives the Eric of a poor man? Because a poor man is not at all obligated. But if the rich man said, I take upon myself to give my Eric, the poor man overheard him and said, I take upon myself to give what this man said, and he gives the Eric of a rich man. If he was poor and became rich, or he became rich and became poor, he gives the Eric of a rich man. But Rabbi Yehuda was even a poor man who became rich and then became poor again gives the Eric of a rich man. But okay,
Gets in.
we are on to the essence of a get is you are permitted to every man. The Yehuda says, and this which you shall be to you from me is a writ of divorce, a letter of abandonment, and a bill of release to go to be married to any man that you want. The essence of a document of emancipation is you are a free woman, or you are free to yourself. Three getting are void. If she married, the offspring is legitimate. If she wrote it with his handwriting and there is no witnesses on it, if there are witnesses on it, but it has no date. If it has a date but has only one witness, these getting are void. But if she married, the offspring is legitimate. If Elazar says, though, although there are no witnesses on it, but he gave it to her in the presence of witnesses, it is valid, and one collects from the mortgaged properties because witnesses sign a document only for the sake of the general good. If two men send two identical kittens and they became mixed up, if he gives both of them to this one and both of them to this one, therefore, if he lost one of them, the second is void. If five wrote as a group of a get, so and so is divorcing so and so, and so is divorcing so and so, and the witnesses are below, they are all valid, and it shall be given to each one if the text was written for each one and the witnesses are below, and that which the witnesses are read is valid. Okay.
And Shabbos.
So we're going to finish getting tomorrow, or maybe the next day.
Yeah. Next one.
It's in Yud Tes Aleph. But Eliezer says if one did not bring an instrument for the circumcision before Shabbos, he should bring it on Shabbos exposed, and in time of danger, he should cover it in the presence of witnesses. Furthermore, said Eliezer, we may fell trees in order to take charcoal and to form an iron instrument. But Rakiva misstated a rule. Any work that can be done before Shabbos does not override Shabbos, but any work that cannot be done before Shabbos does override Shabbos. We may perform all the necessities of circumcision on the Sabbath, and we may circumcise, uncover the corona, draw blood, and place a bandage and cumin upon it. If we did not crush the cumin before the Sabbath, he may chew it with his teeth and apply it. If we did not vigorously mix wine and oil before Shabbos, each one should be added to the bowl by itself. Excuse me. They may not fashion a shirt like hang up for it, but one may wrap a piece of cloth around it. If he did not prepare it before Shabbos, he may not wrap it around his finger and bring it even to another courtyard.
He may, not may.
All right.
Yeah.
So, we may bathe the infant prior to the circumcision and following the circumcision, and we may sprinkle water upon him by hand, but not with a utensil. But Eliezer says we may bathe the infant on the third day following the circumcision, when it occurs on Shabbos, as it said, and it came to pass on the third day when they were in the pain. The questionable one is an androgen. We may not violate the Sabbath on his behalf, and Rabbi Yehuda, however, permits in the case of an androgen.
Okay, and I gotta run.
Okay, have a great day. Thank you. Bye.